Very good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in and taking your time out for attending today's webinar focused on AI-enabled accounts payable automation on ServiceNow. So for today's webinar, we have got Russell, who basically manages our accounts in US. And we also have Vikram, who's the product expert for INVOICEFLOW product at Avenir, and he will be sharing in much more detailed length about the current customer stories and the use cases. So before I begin today's session, I would just like to go through some basic housekeeping items that we will be recording this webinar, and there will be some polls conducted in the session. So I would request to, please do take up those polls. That way, it will help us to streamline the entire session. Second thing is, if you have any questions, so we have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, but feel free to use the Q&A panel in your Zoom webinar or Zoom meeting meeting UI, or you can use the chat box functionality. So we will be taking those questions after the end of the demo. And lastly, don't forget us to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, wherein we share a lot of really good content specifically created for accounts payable team, finance team, legal team, and procurement team. So without further ado, I'll just request Russell to start over. Russell, over to you.
Thanks, Maddie, and thank you everybody for joining the webinar today. So the topic for today is accounts payable or processing, leveraging modern AI and machine learning technology built on the ServiceNow platform. So let's set the table and talk about some of the challenges that exist within AP or invoice processing. This is actually from a recent poll we did. What are the biggest challenges you face within these processes, invoice, accounts payable? As you can see here, manual work, manual processes really kind of towers above the rest. This likely comes at no surprise, right? Traditionally, accounts payable is extremely manual. Many organizations today are still taking a paper-based approach. In fact, they're printing out documents and invoices and handwriting and filing them in filing cabinets. And one could even say that manual processes are really the cause for many of the other listed challenges. Time and deficiency, for instance, lack of automation, challenges with approvals. All of this can really be traced back to manual processes. So these things aren't really mutually exclusive. Odds are, if you're feeling some of this pain, you're feeling it in a couple of areas here. Another key item, another key point, I should say, is the third one, technology silos. This is a major point of frustration for the folks who are actually responsible for processing invoices. They're taking invoices coming from email or even the physical mailbox, keying the data into multiple systems, cross-referencing the data with other records that are in other systems. As you can imagine, as you might know, if you're on this webinar, this is a very painstaking and a very error-prone process. Not only does it add time, it adds rework. This is where a lot of clerical mistakes can come back around and cause you to have to go fix things later on. So now that we've talked about just some of the challenges that are seen throughout the industries within these processes, let's talk about a success story. This is about one of our customers, TD Williamson. So TD Williamson is a global pipeline manufacturing and service company in the oil and gas industry. So last year, their finance team was suffering from many of the challenges that we discussed on the last slide, most notably the manual work that it took to process invoices, large volume of global invoices being managed by a central and overburdened team. So the data that we looked at on the last slide, it was really a direct representation of some of the issues TD Williamson was facing. And just for scope and for sizing, they're processing 60 to 70,000 invoices on a given year. That's over 150 invoices every single day of the year coming in. So the two key items that stood out about Avenir for TD Williamson were, first of all, our AI and machine learning technology, which we're going to look at in great detail later. This can dramatically reduce the manual work involved in managing invoice data. extracting the data out of the invoice, leveraging AI algorithms, creating records, managing some of that process. A lot of that process using technology instead of people is a great value point that TD Williamson is really experiencing good results with. The second piece was that we're built on the ServiceNow platform, which is greatly aligned with their IT strategy. They were very explicitly trying to find a solution that was not going to add a new application that they had to manage. Avenir being built on a platform, ServiceNow, that they already adopted in their business and were already using extensively was a very strong part of the business case that they built to ultimately move forward with Avenir and deliver these results. So let's go ahead and hop into a quick poll, simple yes, no question. Is AP automation on your roadmap? Is this something that your organization is looking into solving this year, next year, sometime in the near future? Give everybody a minute to think it through. And we should be getting the results back in any second now as the poll is concluding. So we're about 2/3 of you said yes, AP automation is on your roadmap. A third of you said no. So interesting results. That's about what I would have expected. And we are looking forward to explaining some of the value proposition of how this works and how it might be impactful for your business. For those of you who are looking into this year, we do invite you to get in touch with us. We'll certainly get in touch with you after the webinar. So moving forward, let's talk a bit about Avenir INVOICEFLOW. INVOICEFLOW is our accounts payable automation solution that is built, like I said, natively on the ServiceNow platform. So INVOICEFLOW is designed to tackle the entire end-to-end process from the time an organization, a vendor, a supplier sends you a bill until the time that it is ready to be paid in your back-end systems. So that includes collecting the bill, no more monitoring the invoice. If anybody here is on the AP team, we do that for you. Extracting the data, creating invoice records for all of the incoming bills, classifying them as PO-based invoices, non-PO-based invoices, giving you real-time analytics that are system generated and automated to really eliminate a lot of the burdensome work and give you a running head start on the actual processing tasks that go into the verification process. This is all built on the ServiceNow platform as well, which means that we can integrate with your back-end finance systems. We can pull in PO data from other systems. We can ultimately create what's called a touchless invoicing process for a large percent of your incoming bills. Best of breed organizations who are doing this really well, they have a touchless invoicing process for about 70% of their incoming supplier invoices. That means system driven. Nobody has to mess with it. It gets auto posted, auto paid, routes straight into the back end for ACH or a check cut. We achieve this by leveraging our own proprietary AI and machine learning technology on the front end. This creates an engine to receive incoming invoices, take the data out of those invoices, create a record, and then use that data to trigger downstream actions and workflows. After the extraction and the record creation process is done, we leverage ServiceNow for their workflow engine, for their integration with other systems, so we can complete the approval process, complete the validation process, and ultimately push this into the back-end system for remittance. So that's a quick overview of the end-to-end workflow for accounts payable and invoice processing. At this point, I am going to pass it to Vikram, who is going to take us on a tour of the application in real time. So Vikram, I'll stop my screen share and over to you, sir, for a demo.
Thanks very much, Russell. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vikram, and I'm the product expert at Avenir. And first of all, I'd like to thank every one of you for joining us today. I'm really encouraged by the participation. So thank you all. Thank you very much. With that, I'm going to share my screen and actually show you the product and how it works. and we'll see all of the things that Russell has just talked about. So, all right, so just give me a few seconds and let me bring my screen up on air. All right, so currently, let me get rid of the Zoom panel. Okay, so all of you should now be able to see the screen that I'm on, which says Invoice Analytics.
Yep.
And all right, thank you for that confirmation, Russell. So today I'm logged in as a user, Rohit, and he's logged into Avenir's invoice flow. That's where on the left, top left, you see the branding of our application. Now, this is a complete end-to-end AP automation solution, like an invoice processing solution. Okay, so we can imagine that probably Rohit is an AP staff who's logging in today, and it's just a normal routine day at work. And just to set a little bit of context, what happens, when you're doing invoices manually, is you receive those invoices. Maybe the supplier sends it as an email, and then you have to open that attachment, manually read through that invoice, and create that record somewhere in some record of system by keying in that information. It takes about at least 2 to 3 minutes per invoice. And if you're dealing with, say, about 50 to 100 invoices per day, it's a straight math. That's a lot of time consumed, which you could have actually spent in doing other stuff that's more productive than just keying in data. So as Russell said, we completely take that part away from you. So let's see how that actually works. Okay, let me play the role of a supplier to begin with. So I'm a supplier. This is an email that I'm going to send to this is an email I'm going to send to you, to the company. Here's the invoice attachment. And I'll just quickly show you this in email, this invoice. It's a proper invoice. It's a Dell invoice, number 1011. That's the invoice date. And there's the line item, there's pricing, tax. So it's a proper invoice, okay? So what the supplier does is exactly what he's doing today. Just click send, and the supplier's job is done. So we are not at all changing the way the supplier functions or behaves. But let's come back and see what's Rohit doing here today. So he logs in, he's looking at invoice analytics, and he's looking at, first thing he sees here is all invoices by status. So he can see a complete spread of all invoices across various stages of the organization, right? So for example, if he wants to see which are the approved invoices, that list is right here. If you want to see which invoices are, currently pending approval, so that list is also available here. If you scroll down here further, he would see a categorization of the invoices by PO. So essentially, if the invoice has a PO on it, it's a PO invoice. Otherwise, it's a non-PO invoice. Now, what I'd like you to notice here is that the current latest non-PO invoice is 647, and the current latest PO invoice is 654. So I just want you to remember these two numbers, 654 and 647, because in just a short while from now, and we will actually see that happen, the supplier that sent in that invoice, which we just saw by email, is going to appear in one of these queues automatically. Now, because we saw that invoice, it had a PO number, it's going to be categorized as a PO-based invoice. So we should see that appear here. So we'll look at that when it comes in. But in the meanwhile, let's pick up one of this invoices, let's say 654, okay, which is a PO-based invoice, which probably was created a little while back. And let's see what our application, what Avenir has actually done. As Russell said, we use artificial intelligence to completely automate the invoice extraction process. So you can see here a very nice and neat side-by-side view where you see invoice information on the left. You actually see the invoice itself attached with this record on the right, okay? And let's take a look at what AI has done, artificial intelligence. So first of all, it's picked up the invoice number, which is 1011. It's picked up the invoice date, which is 15th of September. So if you see here, the invoice date is 15th of September. And it's picked up other information such as the vendor, of course, that's important. The vendor Dell has been picked up over here. It's also picked up invoice totals, the payment terms, and the line item as well. So if you see this level of accuracy that our application, the AI model, AI engines use, it's a very high level of accuracy. So even though it says needs attention here, you can pretty much see that the extraction has been really accurate. Okay. Now, of course, there would be those situations where in some cases, one of the invoice pieces of information here may not be exactly accurate, in which case you could actually go ahead and change this manually. Notice also that if you've not already seen it, some of these fields, like the vendor, has a blue tick mark besides it. Now, what that means, and in fact, when you use our system, you should be looking for this blue tick mark, because the blue tick mark indicates that this vendor Dell, which was picked up from the invoice by our artificial intelligence, actually matched a valid onboarded vendor Dell. And so that's a valid vendor, right? So that means that this is a valid invoice. It's not someone just trying to slip in an invoice, a fraudulent invoice into your system, right? So this is a valid vendor. Likewise, you would notice that the PO number has matched with a system PO that actually exists. And that's why you see a blue tick mark there, because it's actually matched with the PO. And in a similar way, we do a matching with the goods receipt note, which is the your GRN or the receipt. So it's a complete three-way matching system, right? It's pretty accurate. Now, if you can just imagine, people doing this manually, this data entry, keying in job, it takes so many, hours of effort per FTE. All of that is completely gone. It's eliminated. So you don't have to do that manually anymore. If I now go back to the screen where we came from, and I'm now back on the landing page, you will now see that while we were talking about invoice 654, a new invoice 658 was created automatically. This is that invoice that I just sent as a supplier. Effectively, what's happening is you don't have to look at email anymore. You don't even have to monitor email for any incoming invoices any longer, because this effectively is your new inbox. As they say nowadays, right? It's very common. Black is the new gold and green is the new orange, things like that. So I'm saying that this is your new inbox. And it's a very advanced inbox, because not only is it accepting the invoices automatically, it's creating that invoice record for you. It's extracting the information from the invoice using artificial intelligence. It's doing all of that matching for you. It's doing the vendor validation for you. And all you need to do is, if everything matches, if you see those blue tick marks, you really need to do nothing about it. It's literally touchless, and you're working literally like managing by exception. So if there's an exception, that's when you need to do something about it. Okay, so let's say, for example, let's take this invoice. And so it's a similar looking invoice, which we just saw, but it's right now in the created stage. The extraction has happened. The vendor validation has happened. We want to match the PO record and the receipt over here, the GRN record. And if there's an exception, we would send it for approval. So I'll click Actions and initiate a two-way match. And as soon as I click two-way match, it's immediately going to run a match. And if you see, it has found a match with PO. That's why you see the blue tick mark. And so that's good for you. For whatever reason, it's not found a match with a GRN. And so it's telling you that, would you like to continue for approval? So yes. Because it was an exception in this case, I've sent it for approval. And now you can see that this is now in the approval stage. Now, if you just imagine that, you walk away for lunch or you go home and come back tomorrow, of course, maybe you're working remotely nowadays, but it's start of a new day and you want to see, what's the approval status on this invoice. You don't need to call or email anyone. You can see it right here on this side. You will see approval history. You can see that this invoice was an approval was requested. This is the user to whom the approval has been requested on this date and this time, and that it's still not been approved. The best part is this person, the Peter, who has to approve, also can approve from within the system. So let's take a look. So I've logged in, I've opened up this other browser where I've logged in as Peter. Peter is someone who approves invoices, and he can, of course, can be again located in any time zone, any part of the world. It's the best thing is everyone is coming onto the same common platform. This platform is connecting people and processes and time zones and geographies together, right? So Peter, as soon as he logs in, he sees 4 approvals waiting for him in the queue. This is the latest one, 658. This is the one that we are talking about right now, okay? So Peter can simply go inside and look at all the information about this invoice is available to him right here, as well as, very importantly, the document itself. You can, of course, magnify this. The document itself, the invoice attachment itself is also available. So both the invoice record and the invoice image is available for Peter to make that decision of approving or not approving. And what Peter can also see is the history of approvals. If at all there was another approver in the chain somewhere, so Peter would be able to see that complete trail of approvals. Let's say at this point of time, Peter wants to approve this invoice. Says, okay, let's make the payment, puts in some comment there, simply hits approve, and that approves this invoice. So this is now, as you can see here, I'm still logged in as Peter, you can see it's approved. But what about Rohit, who submitted this invoice for approval? Does he have to, follow up with Peter or send an email? Let's see. So Rohit, this is back to Rohit. He sees that it's approved and he can see it instantly. It updates here instantly in Rohit's view as well. So Rohit, the AP staff, knows that this has been approved. And at this point of time, he could simply say, for example, associate a GL account code if he's not already done that, and go into save that change. And once he's saved that change, go into actions and send that email. As essentially what this does is, as you can see here, it's actually marked the invoice sent for payment. Now, this is where this invoice can now be sent to your payment systems, from where a payment can be initiated. Okay, so this is how this entire invoice processing works, completely streamlining the entire process, automating all of those painful and tiring manual work of ingesting that invoice, through artificial intelligence and machine learning, and really, enables a smooth, streamlined invoice processing within your organization. If I go back to the landing page, I quickly want to talk about a little bit of interesting analytics that you can get from the landing page itself. So for example, if you want to see who is the vendor with whom you have the highest spend, it's right here. In this case, it's Dell that I'm having the highest spend with. You could actually change this to, let's say, department, and you can see that IT is the biggest spender in this case, in this demonstration instance that I have. So pretty good analytics that you can get from here, but there's a little more. So if you go into the essential reports, we actually give you some of the key metrics measured in the form of graphs right here. These metrics have been identified as some of the top metrics that's of big concern to all AP teams across the world by the IOFM, the International Institute of Finance and Management. So invoices processed per quarter, so you know exactly how much you've spent every quarter. Invoices paid on time, so you can see how many invoices you're paying on time each quarter. Again, that's very important, because if you're not paying invoices on time, it could mean some penalties and liabilities and things like that. How many invoices are being processed per FTE? Again, this is a very good graph that gives you that overall spread of workload across your people. Total number of invoices, total number of PO and non-PO invoices, and this time taken process essentially shows you the cycle time that on an average invoices take in your organization to move from an initial from the time when it's received in the in the system till the time it's approved, and the time it takes from since it's approved till the time it's paid. So it gives you a good indication of overall how well or how efficiently you're managing your invoice processing. Okay. So with that, what I would do is switch back into the slide deck. that Russell just showed you a little while back, just to kind of get back the context. So we saw this workflow. The entire application, as Russell said, is built on the ServiceNow platform. So that's great because you're leveraging the same platform. You'll have a very easy conversation with your IT team within your organization. And we saw this four-step process, the invoice coming in any format, PDF, JPEG, image, whatever the format may be, it doesn't matter. Our artificial intelligence module is able to extract all of the information from that invoice. It does the matching, it does the validation of vendor, and finally, if there is an exception, you can initiate an approval. And once the approvals are done, you can connect it with a GL account code and essentially mark it for payment. And this is the process that we have just seen. But I'd like to point out one additional use case that we see very commonly in the industry nowadays, and that is for those of you who use ServiceNow's PPM module, the project portfolio management. So I'm sure there's this ITBM offering by ServiceNow, which has project portfolio management. And many a times what happens is you initiate a project, say, for example, you want to set up a new data center within your organization. So you need to purchase servers and racks and cables and things like that. So what you would do is you would create that as a project in the PPM module. And against that project, you would have a cost plan. So for example, what's the cost that you're going to spend on buying servers? What's the cost you're going to spend on buying racks and things like that? So you'll have those expense lines essentially under the project that you're creating, right? So what you really want to do now is, in addition to matching the invoices that you receive, so you would normally do the matching with the POs and the receipts, of course, but you also want to match it against the cost plan or the expense lines under the project portfolio management. And we do that as well. So this is how it works, a very simple workflow. I'll just quickly tell you what exactly is happening here. So if you see, this is what we saw. We invoices coming in to Avenir in any format that gets automatically extracted by AI, and the invoice record is created in the system. And then we do the PO matching, we do the vendor data matching, we do the receipt matching. But we can do one more level of matching, which is with the cost plan in the ServiceNow ITBM or the PPM module, which I just talked about. Effectively, I'm talking about 3+1 way of matching, or you can say 4 way of matching, right? And once this invoice goes through the approval cycle, if it needs to be approved, not only can we send that invoice to the payments system for initiating payments, but we would also update the expense line. And what this would help you eventually is to create that, the planned versus actual. So here was your project where you wanted to set up a data center. Here was the planned expense, and now here's the actual expenses. And you can kind of do a planned versus actual and see whether you overran costs or you managed your cost well within your budget. So that's an integration that we have to offer as well. So I just wanted to quickly touch upon this very common use case that we see nowadays in the industry. And with that, I'd like to hand it over back now to Maddie.
Yeah, thank you, Vikram, and thank you, Russell. So just a second, let me share my screen. And there is a quick giveaway which will help the attendees for today. And some of the giveaways covers the ROI, the value kits, which you can evaluate right away, maybe after this session, which will help everyone to assess the value which your team can deliver, and start like going through what is the checklist you have to follow, what ebooks you need to read through, and so basically it will help you and your entire team to enhance the knowledge for accounts payable. And with that, I think we can move to the next slide, and we are open to questions. And I see questions are coming in, and Russell is answering them. So I'll start with one of the questions which is not yet answered. So do you partner with MRI as an ERP provider?
So I can take that one, Maddie. We via ServiceNow and APIs or Integration Hub, we can connect with any ERP provider. So we're really financial system agnostic. If you have ServiceNow today, or even if you don't have ServiceNow today, we can leverage the ServiceNow platform and the API library, the Integration Hub, to be able to connect with any system where any ERP or financial system where payments are occurring. Do we partner with MRI? There's no relationship between Avenir and MRI directly as a partnership, but can we connect with MRI to complete the process of paying invoices? Yes, absolutely, we can.
Great, thank you. The next question is, do we need to store POs in your system if we only need invoice extraction API? Do you provide APIs for verification?
So that's kind of a two-part question. Part one, do we need to store POs in our system? No, we don't need to, but that is a possible use case. I gather that this question is about matching invoices against purchase orders. There's really two ways to achieve that. One is to take the PO data from wherever that exists today, probably your finance system or your ERP, and pull that into our system, which we can do via an integration. Or the other way is to take our invoice data after the invoice record has been created and push that into the backend system. I think the first option is preferable because then we can also manage the approvals and any sort of escalations or exception handling. But if you would prefer just to keep your POs in your backend system, we can certainly just do the extraction piece and push the extracted records and data and even PO files into the backend system. Hopefully that addressed the question.
Yeah, it does. So there is another question, so I'll take that up, Russell and Vikram. So it is asking about what AI tool we are using. So we are having our own proprietary technology which we have built, and we have a team of giving us more than 25 years of experience who are working with AI. So this all has been is inbuilt, and you know that's the reason why we are able to achieve more than 80% accuracy for invoice data extraction and processing those invoices, extracting the data, differentiating between 0 and O, which is a classical use case where OCR technology fails. Okay, so there is another follow-up question to that is, does our solution work for camera captured images? Yes, it does. And we have also worked with a lot of customers wherein they have images with stamps, with written all over the invoices, and we were able to successfully capture and process the invoice. Okay, next question which we have is, how does the API do with handwritten invoices from vendors? So does InvoiceFlow application captures handwritten invoices from vendors?
Let me take that, Maddie. So, of course, handwritten invoices is a very special case, and there can be so many variations in handwriting, right? So while AI is great, and yes, we can train our AI model to the extent that it can also identify information from a handwritten invoice, but let me say here that AI will definitely hit a certain limit. AI is not something that can be 100% accurate at all times, and with handwritten invoices, I wouldn't be so confident of a very high level of accuracy. Yes, we can still extract it. We can still automate the process of creating that invoice record. We can still attach the invoice image along with it. We could still extract information. But as you saw in the demonstration where it shows you that needs attention, it's likely that there might be more errors in a handwritten invoices, and you may actually have to manually just correct the information that's being taken in. And that said, if it's a scanned image invoice, like a proper digital invoice that's kind of scanned or taken a picture with the camera, yes, those are definitely much better, and we have seen very high levels of accuracy with even such scanned images and camera captured images, as Maddie just explained.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vikram. So there is another question. Can you talk about workflows and how are those set up?
I'll take that. So great question. So workflows are configurable. So, and that's the biggest advantage we have because we are built on the ServiceNow platform. These workflows are absolutely tailored and configured to your needs, the way it works in your organization. So the workflow that you saw today in the demonstration is something that we've set up in our demonstration system. But essentially, we would work with you. We would try to understand how exactly what's the journey that your invoice takes in your organization, and then that's a configuration. So there is absolutely no coding or programming or nothing of that sort. It's all point and click configuration of workflows.
Great. Thank you, Vikram. The next question is, how is the email integration done with InvoiceFlow?
Right. So great question. So typically, in your organizations today, you would be receiving invoices from suppliers at a dedicated email inbox. Many of you may be having one dedicated email inbox. Again, many of you may be having 2 or 3 dedicated email inboxes, maybe depending upon the region of the supplier or any such criteria. So irrespective, what we do is we configure those email inboxes in Avenir, and Avenir starts looking and listening for any incoming emails on those specific designated email inboxes. So as long as the supplier is sending those emails on the same email inboxes, Avenir will be able to automatically pick up those emails, open the invoice attachment, run the artificial intelligence, extract the data, and create the invoice record for you.
Great. Thank you, Vikram. Okay, so I'll just give it a couple of more seconds and see if there are any questions coming in. Okay, so I think no questions. Oh, sorry. There's one more question which just came in. It is about the pricing and licensing. So how does the pricing and licensing work with InvoiceFlow? What's the pricing and the licensing structure?
Sure. So the pricing is based strictly on 2 components. One is the annual consumption of invoices. That's your annual subscription. It's just based on the number of invoices that get processed. And then there's a setup process as well, which will come with a one-time setup fee. I invite you to reach out to us directly for a more detailed discussion on that. We can ask you a few questions and get you a price quote together quickly.
Great, thank you. So I'll just give it a couple of more seconds to see if there are any other questions. Yeah, we had really good questions today from all the attendees. Okay, so no questions coming in, and I think yeah, so we can end today's session. So, oh, sorry, just a second. There's another question which just popped up. So, what's the overall implementation time? So, if we start using your product, what is the tentative implementation schedule?
Yeah, I mean, that one's really going to depend on the scope of the project, right? If we implement this for a small business or a large enterprise, there's going to be some, a range. I would say, 8 to 12 weeks is maybe 6 to 12 weeks is a good estimate. But again, I would advise let's get in touch and talk about your business a little bit more. Whoever's asking these questions, it says anonymous. So happy to have a detailed discussion with you and give you a little bit more of a clear answer.
Okay. So I'm just waiting for our, this is the right time if you have any questions. We have Vikram and Russell on board. We are happy to we are happy to connect with you, but I think we are live. So if you have any more questions, I'll just give it a couple of more seconds. Okay, so finally, no more questions. So thank you, Vikram, and thank you, Russell. And thank you, everyone, for taking your time out and joining in for today's webinar. And even if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us to our website or shoot out an email to contact@aveni.com. And also don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter to check out the other resources which you have developed for contract management, for RFP automation, and for obligation and contractual obligation management. So feel free to check out our other products. And thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.